I came there to tell you a story. This is a story of me, React.js, and a long and hard work. It's been some time since I joined a holiday check company, and I've met 6 developers that were working on the researching of the new stack. It was not ready for the work, but they already spent a couple of months to making a decision that React will be our next big choice. Because at the time, company was using customized backbone.js, which became unmaintainable. So right now, our stack is used by 40 developers across 3 locations, and we are getting very well. So what the hell is React.js? At first, I was thinking that it's some new cool JavaScript framework, but I realized that it's just a view. I was asking myself, where's the rest? How can I insert some data, control what's happening there? So the React views can be used with anything that can add some data inside the components. You can render application into some HTML element, and that's it. Really, you can use any framework. Some brave people are using this with Backbone.js. In this conference, you can meet Daniel Mendalka that was using it with Backbone.js. This is the guy wearing usually big black hat. But I also found that there is ng-react directive that allows you the React usage for the people that can't leave React behind, Angular. But React was introduced with the architecture pattern, which was simplifying the flow of the data. So instead of Backbone, Angular, you can use the Flux or one of the 15 implementations. I presented you a link to the repository where you can find a very nice comparison between the Flux implementation and pick your favorite one or random. So at first I thought that if the programming would be a cooking, React, what would it be? Definitely not a piece of cake. At first, the first phase was hatred, but I realized that I wasn't hating library. You can't hate library can't hate you. I was hating myself that I'm finding so much difficulties at starting with our React stack. So, by saying React, we usually mean that it's come with Flux, and React is just this whole stack for me. So we have Flux actions where the things are happening, stores with the data, some dispatchers of the event, two ways of inserting data to the components, some life cycle of React components. Really, I've asked couple persons about how they started with React, and all they told me that they were lost, and I suggest them to, hey guys, just start with something simpler, not just jump into the hype train to use React for the sake of CV. So when I saw React, I also saw JSX. It's some abomination of the JS used for rendering the views. So it was kind of the first obstacle for me coming to the React world. Plus, beside that, most of the examples of how to use React were at the time already using ES6. So when I really started understanding what this React is about, I stopped hating myself. I knew that I need to understand a few questions before actually starting working with React. So at first I had no answers for those questions, and I was producing the code, the features with React, but with the different mindset from backbone, callbacks, and all this stuff around. So this was leading to very messy implementations. For example, form validations. I was abusing the unidirectional flow. Beside that, the data is flowing one way. I was forcing the components to pass the data in two ways. So when I really understood what this is about in the React framework, I knew that if you keep the component pretty simple, the component itself can be read like an instruction. What data will be inserted to the component, and how the view will actually react to the user behavior or pass data. In the meantime, we have realized that it's best to pass the data, all the global, like window, document, at the top of the applications. So React has something like prop types. It allows you to define the data that will be inserted from outside to the component and used by it. So this actually prevents you from making something wrong with the component. And if the prop would not match the type provided or will be missing, we will get this beautiful error. When you work with 40 developers and you share your modules with others, and they don't have the same knowledge that you have. So the prop types are reminding them how to use the components. So, but you need to remember about defining prop types. So this is where our current JavaScript tooling came for. We are using ESLint for everything, really. It helps us a lot. It's preventing us from making our code base a disaster. So this is, for example, a warning that will be thrown by ESLint plugin. If you use the prop type, the property inside the React component, but forget about prop type definition. So right now, the situation with React is kind of nice, but it wasn't always that way. When JS6 happened, we were previously using JSLint for linting our backbone framework, but JS6 was not getting with JSLint. It took us some time to get our tools together. It was 11 months ago. Our code coverage tool, Istanbul, stopped working with JS6, but after this time, we managed to hack something and create readable code coverage. And by this day, there is some new version of Istanbul. It still has some issues, but I strongly believe that one day we'll get rid of our hacked fork of Istanbul. Plus, really, the toolset for JS6, for linting, for error checking, and everything you can imagine is already there. The community grown up, and it's very nice time to start work with React. I was on one meetup, and some people said that there is no standard way of coding, of testing, unit testing React. But for this, I'm presenting you right now the easiest thing that you can use to start testing React. And it's a combination of Mocha, test runner, and Chai, assertion library. So there was today a presentation about NPM script automation. So we are using this. And all we need to do to run our tests is write the test command at the bottom. So we have these React warnings, but they are not visible on production. So we had a situation where React was evolving. There was pretty early version, and they were changing things from version to version. And at this time, they were throwing warnings. Hey guy, don't use that method. It's legacy. It will disappear. You'll be fucked. So we could not afford to stay in this situation. So we have added this snippet to the code that was disallowing us to introduce new React warnings to the stack. You can actually use this kind of snippet, modify it, and use it for something else than React. I strongly recommend that will prevent most of the developers before pushing changes to the repository. But in the meantime, we actually started using, when we work with 40 people, we started to find out that people were introducing some nasty libraries. And at first we were thinking that some libraries were good, but then it happened that they were not effective. They were introducing some side effects. So we have came up with this kind of code that is checking which modules are imported to your code base. And you can see that there is a const limit. It's actually right now 15, but it wasn't always that case. We were starting with 200, and over the time we are decreasing this value. And when the testing was finished, we were just throwing more error, another one that was telling you that you actually use this library, but we forbidden you to. Remove it. So I heard a lot about React testability. You can isolate component, then just put some data and check the results. What will be the render results? So we had some problems at the beginning. We got the components that get some child components, and there was this component tree. So we are thinking that we only want to test this one particular component. How to deal with its child components. So we started mocking them, mocking every child component. So we would have only one tested at the time. And this was done somehow like this. As you can't actually, during the test, modify if the, for example, document variable is available or not. Actually, you can, but still, it's not a clean way. You can use the proxyquery library and tell the result what this particular method will return. So this led to the situation where we were changing things, but the mocks were staying the old way. And any refactoring was requiring a lot of work to modify the mocks to adjust to your current state of the code base. So what we realized, React is really beautiful thing, but only if you will allow it to be. If you have a component, let's keep it small, because then you can actually use it in another place. In our code base, in holiday check, we still have 2 email components, and the reason why this situation happened was that the other team placed some tracking that we are not using with our email component. So if you will just prevent that situation, keep components generic and simple, you can reuse them at the other places, and via dependency injection pattern, just add tracking stuff and all page relevant behavior. So in React, we can define components in 2 ways. One of them is the preferable, simpler. It's just a simple function. It will just return the piece of the view that will be rendered by the component that is holding this one. The other one is a stateful component based on the classes. You can add methods to this component. It can react on some user behavior like clicks, listen on events. and set internal state, but state can lead you to the mess. When you have data from outside the component, then data from the component, and after a while you will just get in conflict between those two. So we have started with very early version of React. Now actually the version is 0.14.7. So when the React was at the very version 0.14, we were expecting that there will be this day when they will present you the final API, the something that won't change so much again. So from this version, they just jumped into the version 15. Just like that. No, the first one, second one, 15 with this. So the question is, why in Holiday Check we have picked React for our new JavaScript stack? It was simplicity, real. The functional programming is getting more and more popular because it's decreasing side effects instead of wrapping around them. The React is very, very testable. There is this kind of new and popular testing library called Enzyme that allows you to simulate all the behavior, all the data around the particular component and just check the results of this particular set of data. And the last thing is performance. Actually, we don't have any problems with the performance so far, but in Backbone, we found those problems very, very early compared to the React. So I won't just present you a data that React can do 10,000 computations and Backbone cannot. It's not the case. It just works for us. So I was thinking that if you are new to React, where you can find some sources to create a basic opinion about this. So I compared several articles and presented that. You can then find them on slides. So I strongly encourage you to find out how it's like to write in React, to mess in the code. And I'm waiting for you to create your own story. Thank you.
Hi, so what are you using to control your application state? Are you using pure Flux or Redux, Alt?
Actually, we have picked Flexible because at that time we are looking for isomorphic way of managing the application, and Flexible was looking for the kind of stable one. Today we would probably use Redux because of its immutability, which simplifies the managing of the state. But for Flexible, there were some tools invented to wrap existing, for example, data stores and make them immutable.
Okay, so you will try to create like server-side rendering with React?
Yes, definitely, we are using this.
Okay, cool, thanks.
Another one?
Okay, so I might have like a small question because because we're using also React and JSX for our project at my company, and I was like lately thinking about, because there's more and more signs that people are saying that maybe JSX is not so needed. Have you heard or maybe used this? I think it's called a hyperscript. So like instead of having JSX syntax, using just functions which have, for example, names. For example, instead of having this XML-like tag, you could just div. You have just a function div which has arguments like children, props, and what else? Probably 3 of them. So I'm like, have you considered maybe going this direction or?
We haven't, because we find JSX very simple to deal with. The Facebook was actually saying that instead of adding JS to the HTML templates, they just adding HTML to the JavaScript, and it's the next step of evolution. But I saw this approach in Cycle.js.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, Yeah, that's like a recommended
But I
approach.
personally find it unreadable.
Okay, thanks.
I guess there are more people that find it unreadable.